So in today's video, we're going to talk about that feeling of effortlessness, and we're going to be really concentrating on the relationship between the arms and the body at the start of the downswing, so you can just get that sense of just letting the club go and swing nice and freely. Let's get stuck into it. Now, for students that come through that door, one of the things that I'm always looking for on the flight scope is, well, two things. One is what's known as your sort of swing plane. So if I was to draw a line through the heel of the golf club up through my elbow plane, what we're trying to avoid is the shaft angle coming down too vertical. Okay, we're trying to keep that club moving more up and down that plane line, and a good number for some of you that maybe are used to using this would be in and around that sort of 55 degrees. If you're not too certain of exactly what that means, then whilst the video progresses, you'll understand how to analyze your own swing. The second one is what's known as the sort of swing direction. So the swing direction is basically just the direction in which you're moving the club. And I always feel like the best analogy for this is if you were to imagine that you were going to throw a frisbee lead hand only. So if I swung my frisbee towards you, even though I'm going to release my frisbee in your direction, everything is moving to the left of the target. And this is the same in the golf swing. What we're trying to do is we're trying to swing freely. We need to rotate the body through, but we also need to find a way to keep the golf club on plane. Now, back to our first problem, which are golfers that get too vertical. Now, the golfers that get too vertical have more of a tendency as they start the downswing to move closer towards the golf ball. So if you start to move more sort of trail hip forward, what this is going to do is this is going to make it really difficult for you to keep the club on plane. And even if you do, you're going to come down on too much of a vertical plane, again lending itself to inconsistency of things like contact, but also club face stability. You see, if you start moving this way, what tends to happen with better golfers is they do their best to hold onto the wrist angles, but you start moving this way, then all of a sudden you start trying to fire out towards the right of the target, and that's our golfer who's not allowing that club and the body to rotate through the ball, and it often feels like a bit of a fight, and it often feels like you're having to do a lot of manipulation at the bottom of the swing, which is precisely what we want to be avoiding. So how do we get this sort of effortless feeling of just letting the club go? Well, I tend to do it again with students of mine. I tend to break it down. So what I tend to do is I tend to go, right, first of all, backswing position. What we're looking to do is just stay nice and centered and just trigger a nice backswing. Now, I'm going to take my trail hand off the golf club and just lead arm only. And what I want to do is just express the problem again that I tend to see. Let me face this direction for you guys. So what I tend to see is right hip forward, and this sort of forces the club shaft to start to deviate a little bit off in this sort of direction, or deviate in this sort of direction. What we're really looking for is the lead hip and the lead shoulder to come back, because what this does, this gives me the ability for, you see, my left arm can just start to drop downwards, like so. If I move too much this way, it forces my arm outwards. Again, kind of have more of an inconsistency to open the face, lending to lots of twisting. I pull the lead hip and lead shoulder backwards, my arm can just drop more down, and all of a sudden, see, the club face looks very different from this type of position here. So that's certainly the first thing that you want to be sort of trying to introduce, is that sort of consciousness of, okay, well, we're going to swing up to the top, and you want to really feel like that lead hip and lead shoulder are pulling their way back, and which gives you that ability to bring that lead arm downward. Now, there are different ways to swing the golf club, but generally that's a really important thing. And I think from a body perspective, you want to try and stay as close to that type of motion as possible, because that will help you get the club, as I've expressed, more on plane. Now, through the research that comes from hack motion, and hack motion is this device here, so it lives on the back of my forearm and the back of my hand, and it just helps me measure exactly what my wrists are doing. And although no wrist actions are alike, because golfers grip the club differently, but what we do tend to see with professional golfers is as they bring the club in towards the downswing, the lead wrist has more of a tendency, shall we say, to flatten. So there's not an excessive amount of, shall we say, cupping at the start of the downswing position. Now again, if I get a student that I'm working with that is doing too much of this and too much twisting, the idea is to just try and get more of a feeling of getting the club face square, so if you like, roughly perpendicular to your plane line. That's going to give you a better chance of reducing how much rotation you need to do later in the swing. And a great little feeling for this is just to almost get that sense that simultaneously when you are pulling that lead hip and shoulder back, just almost allow the club to start to release. So just don't feel like you're trying to hold onto these wrist angles and lag for too long. Just let the club sort of progressively release. And this will just give you that ability to flatten that lead wrist a little bit. And like I said, there are some golfers that are really successful with this type of wrist position. But again, I'm sort of talking very precisely about golfers in this video that are struggling for club face control. So if you're pretty erratic, I would suggest you want to be working this way and just getting the feeling that you're almost, if I just allow, you see, I'm just allowing that club to drop. I'm not trying to forcibly hold on to that lag too long. And what this is doing is this is just flattening the wrist. So it's producing a small amount more of sort of flexion as we come into the downswing. And again, from this side-on perspective, it gives us that ability to keep that club face nice and square as we continue to move it through. So finally, the way that you put that into practice is, well, you know, one, you obviously can video it and you can draw the line through the heel of the golf club up through your elbow line, and if you can follow that plane line, that gives you a great indication that you're doing the right sort of thing. Another real simple drill is just to do some swings lead arm only and just try and get a sense of, you know, that sort of club face staying, should we say, a little bit more stable instead of any excessive forearm rotation. Now, you can hit some shots doing that nice and slowly, up, let that club drop as you allow it to release, and see what sort of results you get. But what's also useful, and this is a training aid that I use with students of mine, and this is the G-Force training aid, and I'll drop in the description box below some details in case you're intrigued about this. But this has always been sort of categorized as a bit of a tempo club because you can see the excessive whipping. But what this club really does is it exposes, in my opinion, golfers that kind of get a little bit firing a little bit this way, because it's not going to allow you to kind of cheat that rotation around the face. So it really forces you to get this feeling of, you know, in my opinion, getting that lead hip back, getting that lead shoulder back, and just letting that club progressively drop down onto plane. And you'll know, because if you're a kind of golfer that gets too twisty, and you kind of notice this is when you're hitting this, it's loads of kicking around, it's off towards that right hand side, then this is a great training aid for you to just get that sense of just allowing that club just to drop down as you initiate that downswing position. And although it feels quite peculiar, I'm not going to lie, it's something that will really sort of sync up that body and arm motion. So let it drop. The way you're going to let it drop is, first of all, understanding that you need to pull that lead hip and lead shoulder back. And then therefore, if you want to kind of just get that effortless sense of just letting that club release, you just need to make sure that you're not too reliant on any excessive club face rotation. And the way you're going to avoid that is just allow those wrists just to kind of down cock. You'll get the feeling of just letting it go at the start of the downswing. It'll allow you to flatten that wrist position and give you more consistency and control of the club face. See you guys again really soon.